Gunslinger Snavely here to say, pew, pew. Welcome to our channel, love. In today's episode, we're going to be pitting together the political left's ideology of gun control against the political right's ideology of an inalienable right to bear arms. Where are the lines drawn on this matter in the USA and internationally? Are there trends and statistics that can be observed to help human society with some reasonable level of gun control? Is it possible that the left and the right are both in the right? And can we use reason to figure out a third option that both sides can agree on? I guess we're going to find out today. Let's start off with some common ground between the two sides rather than immediately pit them against each other. Like, there is one fact about guns that a grand majority of people can agree with, and that is guns make the job of killing people a whole lot easier. Also from the Pew Research Center, if I were to ask an American the statement, should we prevent the mentally ill from purchasing guns? Or should we bar the sale of guns to those who are on no-fly or watch lists? It doesn't matter if you are Republican or Democrat. 80% of you will agree with those statements. Since we have the groundwork laid out for us, let's start critically thinking as a group. And imagine that a hypothetical law was put in place that made it illegal to sell guns to the mentally ill. What illnesses do we include in this law? And are there any that we can exclude? Because both paranoid schizophrenia and obsessive compulsive disorder are mental illnesses. Yet someone who is OCD would hypothetically be fine with owning a gun. You know, as long as I spend 4 hours a day cleaning it and loading it and reloading it. While the paranoid schizophrenic would be more likely to shoot up a bunch of monsters in a Walmart parking lot and killing innocent bystanders. OCD probably shouldn't go under this mentally ill gun control blanket. Neither should most sexually based mental illnesses. And illnesses such as depression are so widespread. How and why would we even bar such an illness from buying guns? What I'm trying to get at is this. Whatever exhaustive list of mental disorders you wish to be included in this hypothetical law, there will be somebody there ready to argue that you have one too many or one too few mental disorders on your list. So now let's see the best arguments for gun control presented by both sides. The right says, more gun control is not needed. Education about guns and gun safety is what is needed to prevent accidental gun deaths. And 95% of US gun owners say that children should learn about gun safety. But I say, little did they know that if they made gun safety education mandatory, if it is in fact needed, is a form of gun control that is used in many nation states. The right says, gun control laws will not prevent criminals from obtaining guns or breaking laws, which is absolutely true, but I say it will make obtaining those guns just a little bit harder to get. Also, take this logic to the full extent and think about it. Murder control laws will not prevent criminals from committing murder. Therefore, we do not need murder control laws. It's time to purge, y'all! The right says, gun control laws and lower gun ownership rates do not prevent suicides. Which is a solid argument. If people want to commit suicide, there are many ways to kill oneself. And they cite that Lithuania has one of the world's lowest gun ownership rates of 700 guns per 100,000 people, but its suicide rate was 45.06 per 100,000 people in 1999. And it is the highest suicide rate among countries with available information. The left says high-capacity magazines should be banned because they easily turn murder into mass murder. And they cite that Anna Mother Jones investigation found that high-capacity magazines were used in at least 50% of the 62 mass shootings between 1982 and 2012. When high-capacity magazines were used in mass shootings, the death rate rose 63% and the injury rate rose 156%. The left says a majority of adults, including most gun owners, support common sense gun controls such as background checks, banning of assault weapons, and banning of high-capacity magazines. To be fair, I found an article that says that bans on assault weapons do not reduce gun deaths. Just because people support a notion doesn't mean that there is good science to back it up. And heck, before researching this video, I thought banning assault weapons was a no-brainer. But it doesn't show the results that we would expect when concerning gun-related deaths. The left says the Second Amendment was put in place to protect the rights of militias to own guns, not the rights of individuals. In 1791, baby U.S.A. wrote within its constitution the Second Amendment, which is part of the Bill of Rights, which states that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Within this statement, there are two somewhat obvious statements that are said. One, that a militia brings security, and two, keeping and bearing arms is a human right. Something and something some historians have noticed, is that these two things are very much intertwined. Rereading the statement as a whole, as a philosophical and psychological statement, a well-regulated militia brings security. Therefore, for the purposes of increasing flow and productivity to our security, keeping and bearing arms is a human right. The notion that the Founding Fathers wrote this statement for the purposes of protecting the individual rights alone is kind of wrong. Within the context of the full sentence that is the Second Amendment, the individual's rights are there to protect the collective. Not the individual's rights are there to protect the individual when their own shiz hits their own fan. For the purposes of straight up answering the main question of the video, I'm going to have to do some real talk. This is going to be some real talk, y'all. Okay, taking all the guns away is a bad idea. Giving every last body a gun, also a bad idea. Too many dead bodies when you take either extreme path. Now, gun control, as a notion in and of itself, is, wait for it, controlling. And you know what else is controlling? A ducking, well-regulated militia. A militia that got their shiz together. A militia that knows where most all of its guns are. A militia that controls where its guns are. A militia that already, in its own right, requires a background check of physical and mental health just to get in. Do you think the Founding Fathers expected a group of white bass hicks to be the source of their security? White bass hicks who ain't regulating shiz and showing off their inalienable right to bear arms? Heck to the nah! You know who they were expecting to provide us security? I'll tell you who they'd be expecting to provide us security. The military. You know, back in the day, they didn't have a U.S. Army taking care of the big stuff for us. They had the common man there, as part of the militia, taking care of that big stuff. Y'all want to stop this onslaught of mass shootings in our culture? Have a couple of your military boys and gals guarding the places you want to see protected. High schools? Military. Universities? Military. Airports? Military. Southern borders? Use the ducking military! So yes, gun control increases security. And yes, it may infringe on human rights, but you can get your rights back as soon as you decide to add to the collective security in the military. And you can still get your guns from rural town Letterkenny, U.S.A. Just let the government know what heat you are packing, why you are packing heat, and how you will be protecting your heat so that your dumbass 5-year-old doesn't blow off his or his brother's head. We ain't living in the Wild West here, folks. Gun control, good. Increases security and flow of the militia. And protects human rights by protecting the lives of those who call the U.S.A. their home. But of course, not so much gun control that guns become impossible to buy, keep, and bear. Because, whoo-wee, that would clearly infringe on human rights. And would definitely be bad for everybody. Alright, we good? We good? Alright. Now back to your regularly scheduled type of talking. And even though guns were abundant in revolutionary America, so were the gun restrictions. This may sound stupid now, but they had gun laws making it illegal to sell guns to Native Americans, Irish indentured servants, and black slaves. So even then, with the Second Amendment fresh on everyone's mind, there is evidence of gun control in some form. And since it appears that some level of gun control is good and reasonable, it'd be nice to have some gun-related statistics to help guide politicians to help create policies that would hypothetically reduce the number of gun-related deaths in their jurisdiction. And that's what I'm here for. In a paper by Cooper et al., it says that available information suggests that automatic weapons and other high-capacity semi-automatics are involved in as many as 57% of firearms mass murders. However, paraphrasing David Hemingway, who is the director of the Harvard Injury Control Research Center, suggests that even though banning assault weapons may reduce the number of mass murders or shootings, it would do little to no effect on reducing the number of deaths caused by guns. Also in a 2017 paper, Hemingway examined laws that banned assault rifles in the context of other firearms-related laws. And none of the assault weapons banning laws found a decrease in firearm homicides. So apparently, banning semi-automatic and automatic weapons doesn't reduce the amount of gun deaths. Here's a question. Where are the world's guns? Wait for it. Just look at this graph. Let it soak in. Okay, next question. What is the best guesstimate for the number of gun-related deaths connected to each type of gun? Even though handguns and shotguns have similar prevalence in quantity available, handguns by far are the most frequent gun of choice in homicides. But the type of gun isn't the largest indicator of what gun is likely to be used to kill someone. Studies have shown a significant correlation between the size of caliber and frequency of gun homicides. The larger the caliber of the gun, the more likely it'll be used to kill someone. Here's another question. Is there any correlation between the number of guns and the number of gun deaths in a country? Or gun to person frequency and the number of gun deaths per capita? Alright, wait for it. I'm going to show you another graph. The first graph, when compared to all countries that have this data, no correlation is found. However, if you have only developed countries with this graph, and excluding the very racist and killing South Africa, there is a strong correlation found. A good formula to remember this by is developed country plus more guns equals more death by guns. Or, depending on who you're talking to, mad and crazy people in the country plus just a few guns equals significantly more death by guns. Which brings us to the next question. Are there any psychological trends inside the minds of those who commit mass murder? Dr. James Knoll, in an article on psychologytoday.com, says this. Most perpetrators are young males who act alone after carefully planning the event. They often have a long-standing fascination with weapons and have collected large stores of them. The shootings usually occur in a public place and during the daytime. The mass murderer is an injustice collector who spends a great deal of time feeling resentful about real or imagined rejections and ruminating on past humiliations. He has a paranoid worldview with chronic feelings of social persecution, envy, and grudge-holding. He is tormented by beliefs that privileged others are enjoying life's all-you-can-eat buffet while he must peer through the window, an outside loner always looking in. He creates and enacts an odious screenplay of grandiose and public retribution. Like the child who upends the checkerboard when he does not like the way the game is going, he seeks to destroy others for apparent failures to recognize and meet his needs. Fury, deep despair, and callous selfishness eventually crystallize into fantasies of violent revenge on a scale that will draw attention. The mass murderer typically expects to die and frequently does in what amounts to a mass homicide, personal suicide. Some clearly do not meet criteria for any mental disorder and often may justify their acts on political or religious grounds. We can easily predict a high-risk group, but have no way to identify the one specific person who will go haywire or when they will go haywire. One last thing that I think everyone should be aware of concerning people who commit mass murder, oftentimes they tell someone that they are going to do it, either explicitly or in a clear, negative, and weary tone. So if someone you know meets the general criteria of someone who is in the high-risk group, and you hear or see them communicate that they are going to do it, here is my professional list of common sense list of things to do in this situation, as helped by my bachelor's degree in psychology and my minor in criminology. First, talk to them. You alone may be able to stop or persuade them from doing those harmful actions. Second, call their authorities, family members, pastors if applicable, police, people who are above them who can investigate further and talk to them. And third, at least in the following weeks, try to befriend them. Nobody can be friends with everybody that they meet all the time. But people like that obviously need some extra loving if they get to that point. Prove to them that the way that they were thinking was wrong, and that there are people who do care about their needs. Here's a question. Where are the most common mass murder locations? The sample size that I found was from an article on the Washington Post, and it records every instance of 4 or more people dying from a gun in the United States since 1969. So here are your top 10-ish mass murder locations. Low and tied for number 10, but prevalent enough to get me to notice, was post offices, military bases, and auto shops. Number 9, the malls and marketplaces. Number 8, elementary schools. Number 7, on government property. Number 6, high schools. Number 5, colleges and universities. Yes, places of education are hotspots. If we combined them, they would be collectively number 3. Number 4, religious meeting places. Number 3, at home, in close proximity to someone who just snaps and goes cray-cray on the fam. Number 2, at bars, clubs, and restaurants. And the number 1 place you are most likely to experience a mass shooting event, which is still very unlikely, is by the hand of your coworkers. It doesn't matter if it's white collar or blue collar. A stressed coworker can be a deadly coworker. So smile, make a friend, and watch them spare your life as they shoot up the place and they don't tell you first. Here's a question. Are there any laws in place in certain states and provinces that are successful in keeping gun deaths low? Even in the United States? Oh yeah! Massachusetts got wise and treated the ability to buy a gun very similarly to the way that we buy a car, with a gun license and registering the gun into the Massachusetts Gun Transactions Portal. Recent data shows that Massachusetts had 3.6 gun deaths out of 100,000 people. In comparison to New Hampshire, which is very close and similar culturally, but has very lax gun control laws, they have a gun death rate of 9.9 out of 100,000, almost 3 times more. And the top 3 states with regards to gun death rates are Alaska, Alabama, and Louisiana. All of which had loose gun laws, all had gun death rates over 21 out of 100,000. Now, internationally speaking, there is one nation state that has such an amazingly low gun homicide rate that it would be wrong of me not to bring it up, and that nation is Japan. In Japan, most but not all guns are illegal. Gun ownership is therefore rare, and the gun homicide rate in Japan is 1 in 10 million per year. The only guns that Japan permits are shotguns, air guns, guns with specific research or industrial purposes, or guns that are used in competitions like skeet. However, one looking to obtain one of these few legal guns in Japan must go through an onslaught of prerequisite tasks. 1, they gotta obtain formal instruction on the safety and usage of the weapon. 2, they gotta pass a battery of written, mental, and drug tests. 3, they gotta undergo a rigorously detailed background check. 4, they gotta inform the authorities of how their weapons and ammunition are stored, mostly to see if they are doing it safely. And 5, they gotta submit their firearms for annual inspection, again for safety reasons. This may be a little bit overkill, like banning handguns and requiring that you have to get your gun inspected every year. May be unnecessary, but their impressive numbers speak for themselves. Some analysts speculate a couple reasons why Japan has such an aversion to firearms. May be from the demilitarization that happened in the aftermath of World War II. And since the citizens observe that the overall crime rate is low, most Japanese see no need for firearms. So now there should at least be some level of urgency to resolve this issue to, at least statistically, reduce the amount of gun-related deaths that happen within any state that enacts policies consistent with what this research shows. But anywho, hopefully as a result of all this research, you may now realize that the liberal concept of gun control is actually reasonable and can work, and that the conservative concept of an inalienable right to bear arms may bring security when it is reserved for the military and controlled within acceptable reason within the main populace. Personally, I think that Massachusetts' way of requiring a license and registration to buy a gun, plus a part of Japan's way to require a mental and background checks every time you get the license, which I think should happen once every 5 years, plus 1 or 2 military personnel guarding at least all of our schools and universities, and businesses that can buy that kind of security time, plus a cultural awareness to love and befriend those who are in the high-risk category to become mass murderers, will be all that we need to combat this cultural epidemic within the US and around the world. This video was made by Tim and Kaiida Snavely on a channel called Death of a Notion, and definitely not by people who imagine a utopia involving 0 guns, nor involving 0 gun control restrictions so that every last bad Chad and crazy Dave can buy whatever gun whenever they want. Because as long as there's deviants, and statistically there always will be, there will need to be some security system in place to redirect those deviants from causing themselves or society harm. And hey, if you would like to become more enlightened with joy and knowledge, depressed because I killed a notion that you held on to and you accept that, enraged because I killed a notion that you held on to and you're trying to defend a dead horse, or thoughtful because I listened to well-reasoned counter-arguments, to defend the notions that I try to bring death to. If you would like to be more any of those things, please do us a giddy and click on those like and subscribe buttons. And until next time, kumbaya, motherfuckers. The right goes... The left goes... Hee-haw! The Tim goes... Quack.